Some stories disappear, some are erased, and some are waiting to be uncovered. The Dark Bureau.
Across the world's cities, towering buildings and sprawling campuses often fly the flags of charity, education, or faith. Yet quietly, beneath this public veneer, religious organisations have assembled vast business empires. Control of prime real estate, universities, media companies, and industrial facilities, managed through non-profit labels. While tax exemptions were intended to serve public good, they have been harnessed to construct labyrinthine networks that mask and protect immense stores of assets and power. Today, the limits between belief and business are blurred, with faith-driven groups leveraging non-profit status to command influence far beyond the pulpit. The reach of these networks is so interwoven with national economies and institutions that the machinery remains virtually invisible to outside observers. The non-profit model built for public benefit has become a shield. Religious movements receive charity status after cursory regulatory review, unlocking financial advantages off limits to ordinary firms and affording precious legal opacity. Some groups maintain social projects, but many deploy donations and revenue through chains of subsidiaries, front foundations, and offshore entities, moving funds and assets across borders with little scrutiny. Behind a patchwork of local registration and shell charities, capital flows into lobbying, property portfolios, and massive private ventures. The intended transparency of the non-profit sector falters under the complexity of these structures, allowing incumbents to obscure control and ownership. This system is neither fringe nor isolated. Major faith organisations in Korea, the United States, Brazil, and elsewhere now control portfolios like those of global conglomerates. East Asian churches have acquired elite universities and major broadcast outlets. American megachurches drive media empires, sports teams, and urban redevelopment. In South America, unremarkable charities own infrastructure, farmland, and property that rival city governments in value. The design is deliberate. Layers of boards, trusts, and cross-directorships minimise internal dissent and external investigation, ensuring that strategic control persists regardless of who occupies a pulpit or public office. The legal backbone of this architecture is simple. Charity registration requires little beyond paperwork, and oversight is modest or absent once approved. Non-profits are free to proliferate subsidiaries. Some exist on paper only. Some are holding companies or real businesses. In each case, reporting obligations are evaded by structuring assets in ways the law allows, or by shifting capital between jurisdictions. Parent organisations often govern networks that stretch from tax havens to domestic shell companies, with assets moved or hidden whenever regulatory interest intensifies. In practice, regulators are overwhelmed, unable to untangle the web or pierce layers of separation between true controllers and their holdings. These structures aren't just ideologically motivated, they yield concrete advantages. Charity status means property can be bought and mortgaged with few questions. Political donations are routed through layers of non-profit entities, out of view of campaign finance rules. Religious media outlets often receive public grants, then operate as self-funded platforms for leadership's messaging. With ultimate ownership embedded in trusts managed by insiders, organisations achieve continuity and insulation, outlasting scandals, leadership changes, and even government attempts at accountability. Even when crisis comes, the core business survives. External efforts to freeze or claw back assets find they have vanished into offshore voids. For investigators, it all begins with a detail: an unexplained property, a recurring trustee name, a convoluted transaction path. But surface inconsistencies dissolve into a thicket of cross-border money trails, overlapping boards, and interlocked trusts. A university might be legally owned by an entity in the Caribbean, which is itself controlled by a trust based in Europe. Media outlets or logistics firms are similarly embedded. When a jurisdiction tightens disclosure rules, assets are swept into new vehicles or jurisdictions, always one step ahead of regulatory reach. The system is so fragmented and adaptive that comprehensive accountability is virtually impossible, with each layer built for rapid response and plausible deniability. Risks do arise. Regulators sometimes open probes for tax evasion, money laundering or fraud. Yet national authorities rarely pursue overhaul. Religious non-profits remain legally distinct from for-profit ventures, and political sensitivities loom large. Faith groups can mobilise donations, votes and media, making governments reluctant to impose real reform. Even when cases proceed, they stall in sealed settlements or quietly abandon investigations. Analysts warn that piecemeal scrutiny cannot touch the engine. The structure is immunised by law, inertia and public deference to charity. Instead of illicit scandal, what emerges is a paradigm of systematic impunity. When bankruptcy strikes a subsidiary, suits are routed to dissolving offshore entities. Efforts to seize or audit property run into empty holding companies or trusts shielded by foreign laws. The distance between power and accountability is purpose-built, a defence refined over generations to protect both wealth and the people who wield it. This architecture confers strategic leverage. University curricula can be aligned in service to group doctrine. Nominally independent media consistently echo leadership narratives. Infrastructure contracts flow to affiliated companies. In elections, faith networks swing resources and influence, shifting policies and outcomes, while their real role remains off the books. Observers see only charity work, but the financial power pulses through every layer of civic life, shaping economies and democratic institutions without oversight or consent. Occasionally, the hidden structure breaks the surface. A failed hospital or a news station found to be voice-controlled by a religious holding. Parliamentary probes and media exposés usually hit outer shells, met with legal denials and PR statements, while asset managers preemptively shift holdings elsewhere. Real change almost never occurs. Leadership fronts remain stable. The system is engineered to survive exposures and adapt, expecting scrutiny but immune to collapse. Over time, only the most visible pieces suffer disruption, while the underlying network deepens its hold. The scale challenges belief. A single faith-based conglomerate in East Asia, for instance, is estimated to control more than $50 billion in assets, on par with the economies of small nations. Commercial profits, converted to non-profit revenue, well through international circuits and re-emerge as university campuses or media hubs. Business decisions are made in private, insulated from regulation and even congregational input. These empires answer to no market or electorate. Their horizon is permanence, and their only required accountability is internal. Historically, this system traces to self-preservation. Movements barred by their governments or short on funds built legal and financial shields for survival. Charter lawyers, shell companies, complex trusts. With time, this became standard strategy. Real estate flipped during downturns, loopholes exploited, lobbyists retained to fend off regulation. What began as protection now functions as sophisticated expansion, each regulatory lesson distilled into greater complexity and more resilient architectures. Attempts at reform are fierce and often fruitless. Governments aware of fraud or illicit cash flows try to enforce disclosure rules, restrict non-profit turned business empires, or limit political contributions. The sector responds by splintering charities, completing massive asset transfers before audits, or leveraging public campaigns to frame oversight as a threat to religious freedom. Political leaders, wary of backlash or lost support, often back down. Even robust new laws are blunted by weak enforcement, judicial reluctance, or global loopholes. International efforts to unify non-profit standards have stalled. No mechanism holds transnational religious business to account, and every attempted intervention meets organised resistance. For affected communities, the cost is real. Hospitals close, schools are sold, and employees face uncertain futures as shell companies vanish. Parents and students don't know why tuition soars or services vanish. Staff discover their contracts and rights were with unknown offshore arms, not the well-known public face. Local politicians find themselves powerless, forced to choose between confrontation and chaos. Rumours and distrust grow, eroding cultural trust in both charities and government. Critically, genuinely charitable services, hospitals, shelters, classrooms, are sacrificed as organisations manoeuvre for regulatory or economic advantage. The policy response is fragmented. Watchdog groups and international NGOs demand new rules, from beneficial ownership registries to stricter board governance. Some financial authorities test transparency regulations for cross-border non-profits, but most reforms die slow deaths among political opposition or fail in courtrooms unwilling to tangle with major faith groups. A patchwork of limited local laws leaves major vulnerabilities. Nations that propose outright bans on commercial activity by faith charities ignite furious accusations of civil rights abuses, deepening the clash between regulation and religious freedom. Religious empires themselves move rapidly to outpace reform. They adopt sophisticated surveillance systems, bulk up private intelligence, and shift resources as soon as threats are detected. Their security measures now rival corporations, blending faith and business in pursuit of unbreakable continuity. Their response to oversight is as strategic as a multinational firm. Information control, scenario planning, and intergroup coordination for maximum flexibility across borders. At the root lies a stark question: how long can structures this opaque and powerful resist accountability? History shows that when unchecked private institutions outgrow scrutiny, trust and stability sooner or later give way to scandal or collapse. Advocates urge transformational change, full transparency, independent audits, suspension of non-profit status for commercial ventures. Opponents warn that any intrusion risks trampling faith itself. Yet every year, the evidence grows that faith-based empires have blurred the line between charity and corporate operations so thoroughly that only bold, coordinated action will suffice. In the end, the loss is not only fiscal, but institutional. Opaque religious business combines the advantages of charity and corporate power to siphon billions, to influence politics, and to outlast challenge. As inertia, confusion, and political fear persist, these networks will grow stronger and more concealed. The longer the status quo endures, the harder genuine reform becomes. The price paid is not just in lost taxes or abandoned schools, but in the withering of trust at the heart of civil society and democracy itself. The warning is clear. As long as these global faith-based empires operate in shadow, complex, self-insulating and protected from real oversight, the challenge is not their existence, but the absence of transparency. The question is not whether further expansion will continue unchecked, but whether society will summon the resolve to pierce the walls and hold power to account before the machinery of charity and faith becomes an untouchable cornerstone of global business.